I'm sorry, but I don't think Helen Zille's election as mayor of Johannesburg will make much of a difference. I think she's got a more or less realistic chance to be elected, simply because I believe Johannesburg voters are just fed up with the poor service delivery and currently, specifically, the never-ending water problems. Although I must also remark that I don't know who will work with the DA to make that possible, because I cannot see the party win an absolute majority in the city, and the Freedom Front Plus, the DA's loyal coalition side track, will not achieve more than 1 or 2% of the vote. But nevertheless, Zille must have a more or less realistic chance. Let's assume for a moment that Zille, through the DA and partners, managed to become mayor. Now she must start turning around the mess in the city. That won't be possible. The comparison between Johannesburg and Cape Town is misleading and utterly unrealistic. Zille became mayor of Cape Town in 2006. That was long before the total collapse in city administration in the country. At the time, the early cracks of destruction started appearing, but even at this stage, it was less severe and much slower in Cape Town than in other cities of comparable size and magnitude in the country, including Johannesburg. The point I want to make is this: there were not even remotely closely as much damage to repair in Cape Town in 2006 than there is in Johannesburg in 2025. In the years immediately following the 1994 elections, the former New National Party initially played an important role in the government of the city of Cape Town. This was never the case in Johannesburg. In Johannesburg, the ANC took total charge in 1994, and the basis for corruption and looting started back then. The cadre deployment immediately commenced. The rot and the decline have much longer historical progression and a footprint in Johannesburg than in Cape Town. The foundation, the capacity, and the ability for good governance and public service delivery were much more fundamentally destroyed. Functionally, the city of Cape Town was only under governance control of the ANC during the period October 2002 to March 2006, when the ANC managed to scrap together a coalition to elect their candidate as mayor. This was more or less 3 years and 6 months. Even during this short period, the city immediately started declining. However, it was simply too short a time for in-depth structural damage to be caused. Zille took over in 2006 and governed the city with a coalition she brilliantly manages to keep together. My point is not that Zille is not a competent politician and administrator. Frankly, I don't know whether she is or isn't. As mayor of Cape Town, she fared well but not better or worse than the city's preceding mayors. Over the years, she did win the Best Mayor in the World award in 2008. But her predecessor never stood a chance to compete in that respect because they governed under the cloud of the globally despised apartheid system. She did well as Premier of the Western Cape, but her successor Alan Winde did no better or worse. Then also perhaps the most vital argument regarding competence of all. I am not really sure how much difference a political executive makes to the state of a city. I suspect that the real difference is to be found in the quality of officials, especially in the case of a municipality, where performance is actually equal to technical capacity. There's only one way a mayor can actually make a difference, and that is if he or she blatantly misuses the position as an entry point for incompetent administrators and thieving, looting buddies that destroy the infrastructure through neglect and capacity through stealing the money and monopolizing resources in a spiral of neglect and destruction, like the ANC. Johannesburg is too far gone. It cannot be restored and rebuilt. An entire generation of important cadres were infiltrated into the city administration. The infrastructure is all but totally destroyed. The patronage networks are deeply entrenched. In order to reconstruct Johannesburg, an entirely new regime will have to be installed, starting from the council, including the mayor, to the administration and functionaries. Vested interests will have to be untangled. Officials would have to unlearn the destructive ways of doing things, which by now has become part of the fiber of the organizational culture and the operating frameworks in the city. Except for beating extremely powerful criminal cartels with political connections up to the highest political offices in the city and country, you will basically have to throw the country's labor dispensation out of the window, because you will have to fire and hire an entirely new city administration. Not going to happen. And Helen Zille is not going to make it happen. The DA has fared nowhere in the country where they took over governance control from the ANC, anew better than the ANC, despite the party's persistent propaganda to the contrary. Cilliers-Brink did not make Tshwane any better in spite of the propaganda. There was no improvement in Johannesburg when the DA-led coalition governed the city. You cannot unlog the web of patronage, looting and cadre nepotism established over the last 31 years, and you cannot make any system or country worked with it in place. I don't know what to make of the findings and accusations made at the Madlonga Commission, but even if all the one-sided accusations are true in its once-sided context, the reality is this. So what? I am sure 100% convinced that the comrades in looting does not sleep more unfordable now than 3 months ago. The system in the country will ultimately protect them. No tenderpreneurs in the connected cadre networks of Johannesburg is going to stop their thieving and looting because of the Madlonga Commission. And neither will Helen Zille. Even if Zille became mayor of Johannesburg, her actual power on the ground will be restricted by existing networks which include politicians and administrators. Zille will have to fight a regime. It's impossible. Zille will not save Johannesburg because she cannot. It is simply impossible.